Hello! How you doing? There's a little attachment to this video, and that is that you're going to have to turn your brain on to watch it. Some people watch videos without turning their brain on. Fundamentally, we have to ask a question. And by the way, this is a video that people have been asking about for years. It only takes me a few minutes, if not a few seconds, to determine whether something is trash or treasure. And CTMU is absolute trash. I'm going to prove it. I'm going to give you some direct quotes. And a lot of people have been asking me, I'm not going to mention this person's name. Oh, this guy is way more intelligent than Einstein and has an IQ of 210 or something. And I, of course, don't confuse logomachy and verbosity with wisdom. I certainly don't confuse intelligence with wisdom. So I'm not going to lay out the fact that I think, I feel, or I believe that CTMU is wrong. I'm going to state equivocally that it is just flat out garbage. We ultimately have to ask ourselves a question that most people usually never ask. If something is ultimately true, and we're talking about a model of the universe here, which of course he never explains the universe, he uses a lot of words and a lot of, kind of like a magician, you know, throw glitter in your face and go, huzzah! You know, he'll do something over here with one hand while he's, you know, pulling the bunny rabbit out of, you know, a secret coat pocket over here with the other hand, but doesn't explain anything. We have to ask ourselves the question, does the center hold? Yeah, in this case, in the case of CTMU, there's multiple centers and everything is pointed off in a different direction. What this is, and I'll prove it here very quickly, and I actually, this stuff is actually way worse than I thought. I never deep dived it too much because I knew it was trash. Well, it took me a few minutes to know it was trash. And then I deep dove it, not specifically for this video, but it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And it's just like, wow, it's just, you know, like maybe this will self-correct somewhere and everything will point to the one. You know, does the center hold? And it's like, no, it just keeps getting worse. And what this is a neat little phrase I've come up with. It's called Jabberwocky Poppycock. And that's just a fancy, funny way of saying it's just ludicrous nonsense. Something either stands on its own or it doesn't before getting into this stuff. And there's no such thing as truth by consensus. And by the way, nothing will discredit something faster than using the words academia, consensus, and peer review. As I've told you before, peer review is one dog sniffing a dirty chocolate starfish dogs in front of him, and that dog is sniffing the dirty chocolate starfish in front of him, and it just goes around and around in circles. Right at the end here, CTMU is met with a favorable reception in both academia and popular media. In academia, CTMU is met and successfully undergone peer review. And several of his papers, I'm not going to mention his name, have been published in academic journals. Well, isn't that nice? But I mean, is it true? It doesn't matter where something was published. It doesn't matter what pseudo-intellectual, and really the word is not pseudo-intellectual, because it's not pseudo-intellectual or anti-intellectual. Well, he's got a really high IQ. What's your IQ? It can't be pseudo-intellectual because he is definitionally an intellectual. It's anti-wisdom. What it should be called is anti-wisdom. Anti-wisdom is logomachy, hyper-convolution. You know, they say you can't see the forest for the trees. What this is the case of you can't see what a tree is for the sake of counting all the trees in the forest. So it's not pseudo-intellectual and it's not anti-intellectual. This is the most intellectual stuff I've ever read. Yeah, but the center doesn't hold. It doesn't stand on its own. This has been peer-reviewed. How dare you? Like I said, the deeper I dug on this garbage, the more, you know, the garbage starts to stink. I guess if you dig deep in a garbage pile, it'll get smellier and smellier, and that's exactly what happened here. I'll give you a few examples of this. And by the way, you should never, and you weren't taught this, and neither was I, that knowledge, and I'm not anti-knowledge, nor am I anti-intellectual, knowledge breeds misery. Only wisdom brings peace. And there's a huge difference between knowledge, which is a consciousness full of a lot of empirical facts, i.e. episteme, versus gnosis. Yeah? Because wisdom or gnosis is self-proximity. Yeah? It's the reason why ignorance in avidya doesn't mean ignorance is no different than saying light. Yeah? But people don't get that. No, they don't. Let me give a couple examples here. This is from one of his books. The physical universe contains all and only that which is physical. Well, most of the universe is actually fields, and fields are not physical. So this guy knows nothing about physics, despite the fact that everybody keeps telling me about how intelligent he is. Which I don't care about the person. I'm actually going after and dismantling the nonsense of what this system is. It's a belief system. It's a system of verbosity and logomachy. It's not the person. Like, well, you're going after that guy. No, I'm not. This is just absolute nonsense. He also says, similarly, the physical may only be part of what makes up the real. Of course, he never defines real. He keeps using the word reality over and over and over again. But he never actually defines reality. Of course, there's two different modalities of reality, just like magnetism is the false reality of dielectricity, even though they're the conjugate inseparable pair. Because the content of reality is a matter of science as opposed to mere semantics. Well, science is specifically physics, and science has never dealt with what is metaphysical. Yeah? Metaphysics means above, or technically the substrate of physics. So he doesn't even understand what the word science means, and he doesn't understand that it's a reference to physical science as opposed to metaphysics. This issue can be resolved only by rational and empirical evidence. Well, that's absolutely not the case. Every ancient culture and people infinitely more intelligent and definitely more wise than this person, because this person actually has no wisdom, nor is there any evidence this person has any wisdom, understands anything. Only resolved by rational empirical evidence, not by assumption alone. We're not talking about assumptions, we're talking about pure retroduction. Abduction is apophatism, this theurgy, this arriving at the truth of things that can't be resolved by what he calls rational and empirical evidence. So right from the beginning, we can actually see the kind of semantic games he's playing. He actually manages to say nothing at all about the universe, and all he's doing is playing with semantics and words like universe and reality and holistics. Particularly egregious of him is his exercises in English semantics, which he does nothing but play with word meanings. He comes nowhere near to actually saying anything. Certainly not about the universe. I mean, this is just absolute pure muddle. It's just nearly impossible to figure out. And I know what he's saying. You know, my vocabulary is extremely extensive. I know exactly what he's saying. And reading it, it's just that it's pure nonsense, or as I call it, jabberwocky poppycock, which is just a fancy way of saying lip-flapping gobbledygook, because the center doesn't hold on any of this, and he never in anywhere explains the universe. So it's impossible to think what he thinks he's actually doing. It's clear, of course, that he thinks he's inventing a new kind of set theory, which he calls the self-processing language. You know, of course, ultimate truth has nothing to do with language, yet he's completely within the whirlpool of language and semantics. You know, you don't need language and semantics to identify wet water, you know, as a, you know, as an infant, you know, understands what wetness and water is. None of that has to do with semantics or language, or ultimate reality is what I'm getting to. He is extremely muddled about the differences between syntax and semantics and between a model and what it actually models. You know, it's impossible to determine what he means by his statement that he's replacing set theoretic objects with syntactic operators. And this is the type of lip blather or lip flapping, blah, 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 that academicians love. This is the reason why the peer-reviewed academicians, which of course is proof that it's garbage. Nothing will tell you, you know, you can smell garbage. You know, you can be blind and feel the heat and smell the smoke. It's like, there's a fire there. How do you know? You can't see, you're blind. The fact that the academicians love this garbage is proof that it is garbage. Nothing he writes actually makes any sense, and I know exactly what he's saying. I mean, I read the most complicated stuff ever written, stuff that melts people's brains, like Theoria Philosophiae Naturalis by Roger Boscovich, which melts most people's brains. I can't read a page of it. And he goes, This is what he's kind of saying as an analogy. He's like, I'm saying, I'm going to go fix the sink in my bathroom by replacing the leaky washer with the color red. Or I'm going to fly to the moon by correctly spelling the Latin word for my left leg. His theory, which is not really even a theory, it's not even a theory by definition, consists word games, arguing about the meanings of words like universe and inclusion without actually explaining anywhere anything about how the universe works or what the universe is or the foundation of the universe. This theory that isn't even a theory is defined by creating new versions of set theory with axioms that are never stated. There's never a primer for any of the foundational principles he sets forward. And his whole specific goal is guarantees that it'll be proved a sound theory. And it's just unsound mathematical theories that are completely useless. Every possible statement he makes is provable to be completely unsound, much less theoretical. I mean, even a theory is based upon sound logic. So he doesn't understand the difference between syntax and semantics, objects and models. He doesn't know the difference between statements and facts, and because of that, which is kind of ironic, everybody keeps telling me about how intelligent this person is. Especially like, have you ever heard of this guy? Have you heard of a CTMU? It's like, I'm quite familiar. Why don't you do a video on CTMU? I was like, well, here you are. The basic statements that he makes are completely meaningless, and it's not my opinion that they're meaningless. See, this guy's 50 points higher than Albert Einstein, his IQ. Which, of course, IQ never tests for anything important like nonlinear thought genesis, creativity, spontaneous thought genesis. And Albert Einstein is famous for everything, and there have been 4 books written about this. Stole everything that people thought he came up with. He stole from a neat little guy called Henri Poincaré. Go look him up. Henri Poincare. Yeah, Einstein stole it from Henri. That's not my opinion. That's a fact. So this cognitive theoretical model of the universe, he explains the connection between mind and reality. Of course, he never differentiates existential consciousness from mind. However, unfortunately in English, that's not clearly defined. Alas, it is in Latin, and it is in Greek, and it is in Pali, and it is in Sanskrit, but it's not in English. Of course, he never defines reality. He kind of touches upon it, but, you know, he has no idea what reality is. In my opinion, it's a fact. So he keeps using the word reality over and over and over again, but he never defines reality. Ultimate reality? Are you talking about consubstantial reality, you know, spatio-temporal reality, which, of course, is a mirage or holographic? He never defines it, so... And my favorite thing is making this video is that they just put an article about him on the Daily Mail. And it says, here's the smartest man on earth says what happens when we die. He believes that when we die, we transition from one form of being to another. Within the computational, there's nothing computational about it. There's no math in nature. There are ratios and harmonics. Yeah, but there's no math. It's not computational. Everything is pressure mediation. Mother Nature, hairy armpit chick that she is, she doesn't have a calculator. She doesn't do computational nonsense. Within the computational structure of reality, meaning consciousness or the soul, well, consciousness is not the soul. We could call it the earthly soul, if you like, but it's not the soul. Moves to another dimension or plane of existence. Well, that's like saying when the radio breaks, that the signal moves from the radio to somewhere else. Well, there ain't no signal in the radio, and the soul doesn't move from one place to the next. Just the radio is permanently broken, which we would say would be death. There's a nearly pure analogy. Move to another dimension or plane of existence that we cannot access while alive. Well, we can access it while we are living beings, and of course life is the consubstantiality between matter and spirit, with the interlocutor, or the glue, if you will, being water, because without water there is no life, or there's no union between matter and spirit. Of course you can access it while alive. This guy, let's say you can't access it while alive, says that the wisest minds who ever lived, Pythagoras, Plato, Numenius, Cydianus, Proclus, Plotinus, on and on and on, Sri Sankaracharya, you know, Gautama Sakyamuni, you know, it's called sati or smriti or apophaticism or theurgy or anamnesis. It goes by a lot of different names, and this is for accessing it while you're still alive. So This guy stands against every wise master who ever lived. And it's also, too, against reality. You know, it is if the signal were sentient, that it couldn't detune itself or access its root while the radio and itself are still connected. Of course, there's no signal in the radio and there's no soul in the body. That's not to say there's no soul, of course. But he doesn't understand this. He is completely caught up in counting the trees in the forest, but if you ask the guy, oh, what's the essence of a tree? Like, what? Well, you know more about, you've counted more trees than everybody on Earth. You know, you've given them computational values, but you still don't know what a tree is. Like, well, you know, I don't know what a tree is. Well, you know, but you got nothing intelligent to say. Well, you have intelligent things to say, but you have nothing wise to say what's the essa, or the essence of something is. You're not that which dies. I mean, it's not computational. And of course, consciousness, moving to another dimension of existence, I mean, he's confusing consciousness with mind, but he could be allowed for that. I don't know how many languages he knows, but consciousness and mind in English are essentially one and the same thing, unfortunately. Yeah, this idea that you can't access it while alive is completely ridiculous. And he says, where do you go when you die? Well, you go, you know, people ask this question all the time. What happens when you die? It's like, well, you're not that which dies. But asking, you know, what is your vector at the point of the separation between matter and spirit, which is death. And of course, death is not the opposite of life. It's the end of life. It's a breakup between matter and spirit. It's not matter and spirit, no different than smashing the radio. You know, you have done nothing to the signal. It's that the radio can no longer, because it's broken, no longer tune the signal. So the vector of what happens when there's separation between matter and spirit at the time of death is like asking the question, well, you got two people on the basketball court standing the same distance from the basketball hoop. You know, is the person throwing the basketball a blind fool? Like, yeah, he's going to miss. He's blind. He doesn't know how to play basketball. Yeah, he's probably going to miss, you know. It's going to go off far afield. You know, or is it an NBA player, you know, with extremely honed skills, and he's going to hit his mark. So asking, you know, where you go, or what the vector, more appropriately, what the vector is at the time of disunion between body and spirit, you know, is no different than asking, you know, who's throwing the basketball? You know, blind fool or an NBA player? That depends on what wisdom or lack thereof one has at the time of a separation. But this person believes that traditional views of heaven and Hades are too simplistic. That's just the opposite. They're convoluted. Whereas his theory, it's not even a theory by definition, posits a transition to an entirely new state of being. Well, break up between matter and spirit once again, and whose interlocutor, of course, is water. And once again, I need to stress this. People need to differentiate out intelligence with wisdom. I am not anti-intellectual. You know, I've got way more facts between my ears than most people, but that's not important. You can get into a car accident tomorrow, or this guy could. Your brain gets scrambled. You can't even remember what your name is. All that knowledge, poof, gone like that. You know, if you lose it in an instant, and it will be lost at the time of death, then talking about empirical knowledge no different than talking about the memory presets on this radio. I take a hammer to this radio and smash it. All those presets, which are in volatile RAM, which is no different than they're all gone. I had 100 saved channels on here, you know. I took it apart to fix it, and I put now all those channels that were saved in there are gone. No different than empirical knowledge. It's not important. This is not anti-intellectualism or anti-intelligence I'm making reference to. I'm pointing out the fact that that's no difference than volatile RAM. You know, you turn your computer off, you know, it's only going to be there while the power's on. You wipe it, it's gone. Gone. This is not wisdom. He thinks that reality, he comes up with a more convoluted pseudo-explanation. Well, it's MAP, which is Metaphysical Ontology Principle, or MAP, and then mind equals reality principle, or M equals R, which means, you know, according to him, so M equals R is that mind and reality are ultimately inseparable. Well, if they were inseparable, then liberation, wisdom, and transcendence, on and on and on and on, it'd be totally impossible. His second axiom, M equals R. Ultimately inseparable. This goes against Greek, Indian, Egyptian metaphysics. It goes against, you know, the wisdom of a child even. I mean, it's completely preposterous and very, very laughable. His third is called MU, or multiplex unity principle, associated with consistency. Well, consistency of what? And consistency relative to what? He uses a lot of words. And, you know, my vocabulary is really good. It's better than most people. I know exactly what he's saying. It's just a bunch of things he threw at the wall. Look at that. Look at all those words up there. This is a beautiful tapestry of words. Yeah, but it doesn't explain anything. Kind of like a Jackson Pollock painting, where there's a bunch of paint flung on a canvas. Look at that. Yeah, but it doesn't explain anything. Well, it explains things perfectly. How dare you? I have a PhD, and all my associates, we agree with it. It has been peer-reviewed to be a perfect painting. It's also very valuable. This MU principle means each part of reality contains a description of the whole. You know, superficially, this would be a reference to holographic incommensurable paradigm, but I mean the Greeks answered that thousands. The Pythagoreans, even before them, defined this and explained it thousands of years ago, and who knows how much further. So that part is partially true, but you know, he defines reality as the perceptual aggregate, including all scientific observations that ever were and ever will be, and the entire abstract and/or cognitive explanatory infrastructure of perception. Now, perception, once again, rupa vedana sana sankara vijnana, perceptions, you know, could be completely fallible. Like if someone has certain messed up brains, they can actually smell colors. When someone sees a color, it registers in their brain as a smell. That's a real perception to them, but he gives weight and fixed principle. In other words, is the immovable arc of throughout the span of all time to perception, which is totally laughable. You have something as shifting as the sands on the shore, and he is giving them the Rock of Gibraltar fixation, which is completely ridiculous, illogical, irrational. This guy is not a philosopher, but also, too, his theory isn't even a theory, and it's completely asinine. You know, the ultimate reality and substrate of the universe is incredibly simple. You have this conjugate reality, which I've explained endlessly in countless videos. The one and its attribute, and of course an attribute of what? Like light and illumination, water and wetness, mind and mentation. This takes further hours to explain, even though it's incredibly simple. This psychophysical presumed reality, which is a temporal mirage, he keeps giving credence to and fixation to perception as reality. You know, reality and cosmic mechanics are governed by pressure of will and, of course, by fields or agnosis, but, of course, agnosis doesn't mean ignorance, but that's a matter for another video. His nonsense is logomachy, it's skepticism, the original definition of skepticism, not how you think the word skepticism means today. And it's just pure sophistry. Sophistry is a very nice way of saying you're just arguing for the sake of argumentation, you're flapping your lips for sake of flapping your lips some more. You're not trying to get to the point or the heart of the matter, or trying to uncover the mystery or foundation of something. You know, it's convoluted, it explains nothing, it breaks Occam's razor. And the center, I've never seen anything where the center doesn't hold more brilliantly than this. But it keeps getting peer-reviewed as being brilliant. But it's not brilliant. But academicians who love this kind of trash, they love things that are overtly complex. They're not complex to me, I can see through it clearly. And I don't mean complex because complexity for sake of loving complexity. Well, it takes a sharper mind to read this and understand it. This is why we know it's true, because the simpleton can't read this and make heads or tails of it. Well, I'm not a simpleton, and I can make heads or tails of anything I read. You say, yeah, CTMU is met with favorable reception in both academia. This guy used to be a bouncer at a dive I don't know if you know that. I don't know if that makes any... People talk about me being tattooed and whatnot, but I don't know what's, you know, which is a greater credence, and it's no credence either way. I just find it funny, because all this was dreamt up by a guy that was a bouncer at a dive establishment, you know. He maintains that the people that have come after CTMU, he says, despite occasional incoherent snipings by anonymous, I'm not anonymous, internet gadflies, no qualified individual has ever found fault with it. Well, what's your definition of qualified? I'm qualified. I bet I know more languages than this guy. We don't have to take an IQ test. The something either stands on its own or it doesn't. And this doesn't stand on its own at all. This is pseudo-wisdom tripe of the absolute worst kind. It's absolute rubbish. It's not my opinion or feeling or belief that it's rubbish. It is rubbish. The center doesn't hold on it. It's just complete, absolute rubbish. You've never seen somebody bathe in so many words and never explain the words, never explain the universe. Nothing he says makes any sense. I mean, it makes perfect sense if when I read it, it means that it doesn't make any sense on its own, by its own. And he says, you know, we can't access this. He says, well, you can't access this while alive. This different plane of existence, which is not existence, because existence, you want to talk about semantics and syntax. Existence means existence, which means to be outside of yourself. So you talk about this different plane of existence. We can't access while alive. Well, you can access it. And he says that ultimate reality and mind are inseparable. If there wasn't, then liberation would be impossible. This is what happens when someone bathes in a sea of words. It's like the ancient Chinese saying that goes, talk not cook rice. Here's another one. So you have a picture of a giant plate of food, but it's not going to feed you. Like, look at this. It's an elaborate painting of food. Is it, yeah, is it not going to feed me? You got any real food around here? There's no substance here. It's logomachy. The center doesn't hold. It's irrational. It's illogical. It is pure sophistry. It is professional, lip-blathering rubbish. Nowhere, and not my opinion, nowhere does he explain or define the universe. He never explains the mechanics of the universe. I mean, it just doesn't exist there. And this isn't even a theory. That's not my theory or opinion. It's not even a theory. A theory has to be rational and logical, and this isn't even rational or logical. It is just a bath of words. My vocabulary is bigger than most people. I know what these words are. He doesn't explain anything. So a lot of you wanted me to go over CTMU, and here we have it. Life is too short to waste on garbage like this, and it is garbage of the highest order. Thank you so much for watching. You want to contact me, information in the description below. Any donation is always very warmly welcome. Feliz Navidad and Merry Christmas. This stuff is garbage. Thanks for watching.